An elderly woman warned a millionaire not to travel with his wife, and the next morning, a luxury car appeared in front of her house. Sarah Thompson, at 68 years old, moved with the agility that only experience can grant. Her hands, weathered by decades of hard work, skillfully maneuvered the cleaning cart as she traversed the carpeted hallways of the Diamond Hotel, one of the most luxurious in the city. The soft brush of the wheels against the thick carpet was barely audible, as if even the sound of her work was an intrusion into the world of opulence surrounding her. Every morning, Sarah woke before dawn, put on her grey uniform with pride, and embarked on the long bus journey from her modest apartment in the suburbs to the pulsing heart of the metropolis. The contrast between her life and that of the hotel guests couldn't be more stark. But Sarah had long ago learned to find satisfaction in her labor, however humble it might be. As she meticulously cleaned every corner, Sarah was a silent witness to fragments of others' lives. She saw stressed executives practicing presentations in front of the mirror, nervous brides preparing for the most important day of their lives, and wealthy families arguing about which exclusive restaurant they would dine at. For Sarah, these scenes were like small plays, fascinating but unattainable. Despite the invisibility her uniform seemed to confer, Sarah had a special gift. She was a keen and discreet observer. Her eyes, a warm brown framed by wrinkles that spoke of a life of work and worry, missed no detail. She had learned to read people's expressions, to intuit their moods, to predict their needs, even before they recognized them themselves. That morning, as she tended to the presidential suite on the top floor, Sarah noticed something different in the atmosphere. The air seemed charged with unusual tension. The suite was occupied by Michael Anderson, a businessman known for his success in the world of finance, and his wife, Laura. Sarah had seen them arrive the day before, him in his impeccable suit, and her in a dress that probably cost more than Sarah's entire year's salary. As she cleaned the living room, Sarah heard voices coming from the master bedroom. It wasn't her habit to pay attention to guests, private conversations, but something in the tone of the voices made her pause. It was Laura, and her voice sounded tense, almost hissing. "Everything is ready for tomorrow," Laura was saying in a low voice. "When Michael boards the yacht, we'll make sure it's his last trip. No one will suspect an accident at sea." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Had she heard correctly? Was Mrs. Anderson planning to murder her husband? A man's voice, definitely not Michael's, responded with a murmur of approval. Sarah felt the floor move beneath her feet, her mind, normally calm and focused on her work, filled with chaotic thoughts. What should she do? Alert the police? Talk to Mr. Anderson? What if no one believed her? After all, she was just a cleaning lady, an old woman many would consider senile or gossipy. With trembling hands, Sarah continued her work, trying to act normally. But her mind was far away, debating between the moral duty to do something and the fear of the consequences. As she left the suite, her gaze met Michael Anderson's, who had just returned from the hotel gym. He gave her a kind smile, not knowing that this older woman, almost invisible in her grey uniform, had just become the only person who could save his life. Sarah returned the smile mechanically, but inside, a storm of emotions and doubts consumed her. What would she do now with this information? How could a simple cleaning lady confront a conspiracy that seemed straight out of a suspense movie? As Mr. Anderson disappeared into the elevator, Sarah gripped the handle of her cleaning cart tightly. At that moment, she made a decision that would change not only her life, but that of everyone involved in this dangerous plot. With determination in her gaze, she headed towards the hotel manager's office. It was time to break the silence of a life dedicated to going unnoticed. Sarah's heart pounded as she approached the manager's office of the Diamond Hotel. Each step on the carpeted hallway seemed heavier than the last. Would they believe her? Would she be putting her job, her only source of incomes, at risk? These questions hammered in her mind, but the image of Michael Anderson, oblivious to the danger that lurked, propelled her forward. Upon reaching the office door, Sarah took a deep breath and knocked softly. The deep voice of the manager, Mr. Robert Hayes, invited her in. Sarah entered, feeling the weight of her 68 years more than ever. "How can I help you, Sarah?" asked Mr. Hayes, looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and slight impatience. Sarah began to speak, her voice trembling slightly at first, but gaining strength as she recounted what she had heard. The manager listened in silence, his expression becoming increasingly serious. "Sarah," he said finally, "I understand your concern, but these are very serious accusations. We can't simply accuse our guests based on a conversation that could have been misinterpreted." Sarah's heart sank. She knew this could happen, but she wasn't willing to give up. "Mr. Hayes, please," she insisted. "I know my job, and I know what I heard. Mr. Anderson's life is in danger." The manager rubbed his forehead, visibly uncomfortable. "Look, Sarah, I appreciate your loyalty to the hotel and our guests, but we can't act based on rumors. I suggest you forget what you think you heard and focus on your work." Sarah left the office with a heavy heart, but with renewed determination. If the manager wouldn't help her, she would have to act on her own. As she pushed her cleaning cart back into the hotel corridors, her mind worked at full speed, devising a plan. That afternoon, while cleaning the lobby, Sarah saw Michael Anderson coming out of the elevator. Without thinking twice, she approached him. "Excuse me, Mr. Anderson," she said in a low voice. "Could I speak with you for a moment? It's important." Michael looked at her with surprise, but something in Sarah's serious expression made him nod. They moved to a quiet corner of the lobby. "Mr. Anderson, I know this will sound strange coming from me, but you must listen to me," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. "This morning, while cleaning your suite, I overheard your wife talking to someone. They were planning to harm you during your yacht trip tomorrow." Michael stared at her, his expression changing from disbelief to concern. "Are you sure of what you heard, Mrs. Sarah, sir, Sarah Thompson? And yes, I'm completely sure. I know I have no right to meddle in your life, but I couldn't stay quiet knowing your life could be in danger." Michael remained silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, to Sarah's surprise, he took her hands. "Sarah, I deeply appreciate you coming to me with this. I don't know if what you're saying is true, but I promise you I'll investigate it." Relief flooded Sarah. At least he had listened to her. At least he would do something. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Please be careful." As Michael walked away, visibly disturbed, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had done the right thing, but what would be the consequences? That night, as Sarah prepared to go home, she saw Michael Anderson in the lobby, heatedly talking on the phone. When their eyes met, he signaled for her to approach. "Sarah," he said in a low voice once he finished his call, "I want to thank you again. I've cancelled my trip and, well, let's just say things in my life are about to change drastically. Could we talk tomorrow? There's something important I need to discuss with you." Sarah nodded, intrigued and a little scared. What could a man like Michael Anderson want to discuss with her? As she left the hotel that night, Sarah couldn't imagine how her life was about to take an unexpected turn. The simple act of listening and speaking had triggered a series of events that would change not only her fate, but that of everyone involved in this intrigue. Tomorrow promised to reveal secrets that had remained hidden for decades, and Sarah, without knowing it, was at the center of it all. The next morning dawned grey and rainy, as if the sky reflected Sarah's internal turmoil. As she headed to the Diamond Hotel, her mind couldn't stop spinning about the conversation she would have with Michael Anderson. What could a man of his position want to say to a simple cleaning lady? Upon arriving at the hotel, Sarah was surprised to be greeted by the manager, Mr. Hayes, who was waiting for her with a tense expression. "Sarah, Mr. Anderson is waiting for you in the presidential suite," he said, his tone a mixture of respect and confusion. "You can go up immediately." With her heart racing, Sarah took the elevator. Upon reaching the suite, she knocked softly on the door. Michael Anderson greeted her with a tired but kind smile. "Sarah, please come in," he said, guiding her to the living room. "We have a lot to talk about." Once seated, Michael began to speak, his voice laden with emotion. "First, I want to thank you again for your bravery. You were right about Laura. Last night I confronted her and, well, let's just say our marriage is over. She confessed everything." Sarah felt a wave of relief, but also sadness for this man who had been betrayed in such a cruel way. "But that's not all," Michael continued, leaning forward. "You see, Sarah, your intervention led me to reflect on many things in my life, and in that process, I remembered something I should have done a long time ago." Michael got up and walked to a briefcase. He took out a folder and returned to the sofa. "Sarah, what do you know about your parents?" The question took Sarah by surprise. "Not much, to be honest. I grew up in an orphanage. I was always told that my parents had died in an accident when I was very young." Michael nodded, his eyes full of an emotion that Sarah couldn't decipher. "Sarah, what I'm about to tell you may be difficult to assimilate, but it's important that you know your father. Your father was James Thompson, my best friend from our youth." The world seemed to stop for Sarah. "What? But how is that possible?" "James and I were like brothers," Michael explained, his voice breaking with emotion. "More than 60 years ago, when we were young and ambitious, we started our first business together, but one day, there was an accident that I caused due to my recklessness." Sarah listened, stunned, as Michael recounted the story of how a business trip had ended in tragedy. The car Michael was driving had crashed, and although he had survived, James had died instantly. "Guilt consumed me for years," Michael continued. "I knew James had a little daughter, but in my cowardice, I never dared to look for her, to look for you." Tears ran down Sarah's cheeks. Her entire life, her entire identity, was being redefined in a matter of minutes. "Yesterday, when you warned me about Laura, something about you seemed familiar," said Michael, taking Sarah's hands. "You have James's same eyes, the same determination. And when I investigated, all the pieces fit together. Sarah, you are my best friend's daughter, the girl I should have protected and cared for all these years." Sarah was overwhelmed. Years of loneliness, of wondering about her origins, of feeling invisible, all took on new meaning. "I know this doesn't make up for the lost years," said Michael, taking a small box from his pocket. "But I hope this can be the beginning of a new chapter in our lives." He opened the box, revealing an old brass key. "This key belonged to your father's summer house. I've kept it all these years as a reminder of my debt to James. Now, it belongs to you, Sarah."
"It's the key not only to that property but to all the inheritance your father left behind, and that I've..." Sarah took the key with trembling hands, feeling its weight, not just physical but emotional. It was a tangible link to the father she never knew, a connection to her. "I don't know what to say," Sarah murmured, her voice broken with emotion. "All my life, I've been nobody."
"And now," Michael gently interrupted her, "you've never been nobody, Sarah. You're the daughter of an extraordinary man, and you've shown that you have his same courage and integrity. I know it's a lot to process, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, if you'll allow me. To answer your questions, to help you discover your heritage, to try to make up for, even if just a little, all these years." Sarah looked at the key in her hand and then at Michael. Her world had turned upside down in a matter of hours. From being a simple cleaning lady, ignored by everyone, she had gone on to discover a hidden past and an unexpected inheritance. But beyond the material aspects, what moved her most was having found a connection, a history, a sense of belonging that she had always yearned for. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I need time to assimilate all this, but I'd like to know more about my father, about my history." Michael nodded with a mixture of relief and hope on his face. "Of course, Sarah. We'll take all the time you need, and if you agree, I'd like you to leave your job at the hotel. There's much we need to discuss about your future, about the company that your father and I founded together." Sarah felt a moment of panic at the idea of leaving the job that had been her anchor for so many years. But then, looking at the key in her hand, she felt a wave of courage. It was time to embrace this new life, this second chance that fate was offering her. "All right," she said, with a determination that surprised even herself. "I'm ready to learn about my true history." As Sarah and Michael began to talk, sharing stories and memories, She found herself immersed in a completely new world. Michael, determined to make up for the lost years, gradually introduced her to the life she could have had. The first visit was to the summer house that once belonged to her father. Located on a picturesque coast a few hours from the city, the property was a mix of elegance and warmth. Sarah, with trembling hands, used the brass key to open the front door. The smell of the sea and old wood enveloped her, transporting her to a past she never lived but could now touch. "Your father loved this place," said Michael, as they toured the rooms. "We used to spend hours here, planning our future, dreaming of changing the world." Sarah ran her fingers over the books in the library, imagining her father reading them. Every object, every corner of the house seemed to tell a story, filling a void in her heart that she didn't even know she had. But it wasn't all nostalgia and exciting discoveries. As Sarah delved deeper into her new reality, unsettling questions began to arise. Why had Michael waited so long to reveal the truth? What else was hidden in the past? One afternoon, while reviewing old photo albums in Michael's office, Sarah came across an image that took her breath away. It was a photograph of 3 young people. She recognized Michael and assumed that the man next to him, with the same eyes as hers, was her father on James, but the third person, a beautiful woman with dark hair, seemed unsettlingly familiar. "Michael," said Sarah, showing him the photo. "Who is she?" Michael's face paled slightly. She is Emily. She was James's fiancée, Sia, before the accident." Sarah felt the ground move beneath her feet. "Emily? The director of the orphanage where I grew up." Michael nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of guilt and sadness. "Yes, Sarah. Emily was the love of your father's life. After the accident, things got complicated." "What do you mean by got complicated?" asked Sarah, feeling there was more to this story than Michael was telling her. Michael ran a hand through his grey hair, visibly uncomfortable. "Sarah, there are things from the past that are difficult to explain. Emily was devastated by James's death. When she found out she was pregnant with you, she didn't feel capable of raising you alone. I suggested she leave you at the orphanage, promising that I would watch over you from the shadows." Sarah stood up abruptly, anger and confusion boiling inside her. "Are you telling me that my mother is alive? That I knew her all my life without knowing who she was? Why, Michael? Why did you hide the truth from me?" "I'm sorry, Sarah," said Michael, his voice broken with remorse. "At that time, I thought it was for the best. Emily was devastated. I felt guilty about James's death. We thought giving you up for adoption would give you a chance to have a normal life, away from our pain and our mistakes." Sarah collapsed back into the armchair, overwhelmed by the revelations. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories. Emily, the strict but kind orphanage director, who always seemed to have a special eye on her. The small attentions, the advice, the looks that now took on a completely new meaning. "I need to see her," Sarah finally said, her voice a mixture of determination and fear. "I need to talk to Emily." Michael nodded solemnly. "I understand. I'll take you to her tomorrow. But Sarah, you should know that there's more to this story, secrets that have remained hidden for decades, secrets that could change everything we think we know." As Sarah left the office, her mind was spinning with unanswered questions. What other secrets did her past hold? How would it be to confront Emily, the woman she now knew was her mother? And more importantly, how would these revelations affect her future, the new life she was just beginning to build? The brass key in her pocket, which once represented hope and new beginnings, now seemed to weigh a ton, bringing with it truths that could shake the foundations of more than one life. The next morning dawned grey and rainy, as if the sky reflected the emotional storm that was approaching. Sarah found herself in front of the orphanage where she had grown up, a red brick building that she now saw with new eyes. Every crack in the walls, every tree in the yard, everything seemed to tell a different story from the one she had always known. Michael was by her side, his presence a mixture of support and constant reminder of the hidden truths that had defined her life. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, unable to form words. With trembling steps, she entered the building. The familiar smell of disinfectant and old books hit her, bringing with it an avalanche of memories. Emily was waiting for them in her office, her face a mask of calm that barely hid the storm of emotions underneath. When her eyes met Sarah's, something seemed to break in her. "Sarah," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. "My girl." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked at the woman she now knew was her mother, searching her face for the features they shared, the signs of a bond that had been there all along, invisible but undeniable. "Why?" was all Sarah could say, her voice laden with pain and confusion. Emily collapsed in her chair, tears now flowing freely. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I know there's no excuse that can justify what I did, but you must understand. When James died, a part of me died with him. I was broken, scared. I didn't feel capable of being the mother you deserved." "So you decided not to be a mother at all," Sarah replied, the bitterness evident in her voice. "No," Michael interrupted, his voice heavy with guilt. "That was my idea. I suggested to Emily that she leave you at the orphanage. I thought it would be best for everyone." Sarah turned to him, disbelief painted on her face. "Best for everyone, or best for you, Michael, to ease your conscience over my father's death?" The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken truths and belated remorse. Emily slowly stood up, cautiously approaching Sarah. "I know I failed you, that we failed you. But you must know that not a single day went by without me thinking of you."
Without regretting my decision, I watched you grow, Sarah. Every achievement lived with you, even if it was from me. Sarah stepped back, overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions that invaded her.
Part of her wanted to embrace this woman, to accept the maternal. Other part wanted to scream, to demand answers, to unleash all the frustration and loneliness of a life lived in abandonment.
"I need time," Sarah finally said, her voice broken but firm. "This is too much. My whole life has been a lie, and you two," she looked at Emily and Michael, "have been the architects of that lie." She headed for the door, but before leaving, she turned one last time. "I want the truth, the whole truth. No more secrets, no more half-truths. If you really want to be part of my life, I need to know everything." As Sarah left the office, leaving behind a tearful Emily and a visibly agitated Michael, she couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. There was more to this story, more secrets to uncover, more truths to face. Outside, the rain had intensified. Sarah walked aimlessly, letting the water wash away her tears. The brass key in her pocket, once a symbol of hope, now seemed like a burden, a constant reminder of all she had lost and how little she really knew about her own history. Meanwhile, in the orphanage office, Emily and Michael exchanged meaningful looks. "We'll have to tell her everything," Emily said, her voice barely audible. Michael nodded gravely. "I know. But is she really prepared to know the whole truth about James, about what really happened that night?" The question hung in the air, a promise of more revelations to come, of even darker secrets threatening to come to light. The true story of Sarah, of her family, was just beginning to unravel. And with each new revelation, the past and present intertwined in an increasingly complex and dangerous dance. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. She took refuge in her father's summer house, seeking comfort in the only place where she felt a genuine connection to her past. She spent hours roaming the rooms, touching objects that once belonged to James, trying to construct in her mind the image of the man she never got to know. One afternoon, while exploring the attic, Sarah found an old, dusty box. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing a treasure trove of memories, letters, photographs, and a diary. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized her father's handwriting on the diary's cover. With a mixture of excitement and apprehension, Sarah began to read. The pages were filled with James's thoughts and dreams, his plans for the future, his love for Emily, and his excitement at the prospect of becoming a father. But as she progressed through the entries, the tone of the writing changed. James wrote about disagreements with Michael, about disturbing discoveries in the company they had founded together. The last entry, dated the day before the fatal accident, made Sarah's breath catch. "I've discovered something terrible. I can't believe Michael is involved in this. Tomorrow I'll confront him. If anything happens to me, let it be known that the truth must come to light, for the sake of my family, our company, everything we've built." Sarah closed the diary, her mind reeling. What had her father discovered? Was his death not an accident after all? Determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, Sarah called Michael and Emily, asking them to meet her at the summer house. When they arrived, she showed them the diary. "I need to know the truth," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the emotional turmoil inside her. "What really happened the night my father died?" Michael visibly paled, while Emily sobbed silently. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice laden with remorse. "James discovered that I was embezzling funds from the company," he confessed. "Not to enrich myself, but to pay off gambling debts. I was desperate, and when James confronted me that night in the car, we argued. I lost control of the vehicle and—" Sarah listened, horrified, as the truth came to light. The accident hadn't been entirely accidental. Michael's guilt went beyond recklessness. It had been his desperation and lies that had led to James's death. "Did you know?" Sarah asked Emily, her voice barely a whisper. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I found out shortly after. Michael confessed everything to me. I was destroyed, Sarah. Not only had I lost the love of my life, but I discovered that his death hadn't been a simple accident. I didn't know how to handle that truth, how to raise a daughter amidst so much pain and betrayal." "So you decided to hide it all," Sarah concluded, the bitterness evident in her voice. "Bury the truth along with my father and leave me at the orphanage." "I'm so sorry, Sarah," said Michael, his voice breaking. "I've lived with this guilt for decades. Every day I've tried to make amends, to do good, to honor James's memory, but I know nothing can erase what I did." Sarah stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the sea roared, reflecting the storm inside her. Everything she thought she knew about her life, about her family, had crumbled. But amidst the chaos and pain, she felt a fierce determination arise. "I can't change the past," she finally said, turning to Michael and Emily. "I can't bring my father back or recover the childhood I lost. But I can honor his memory. I can uncover the full truth about what he was investigating and make sure justice is served." Michael nodded solemnly. "You're right, Sarah. It's time for the whole truth to come out. I'll help you in any way I can, even if it means facing the consequences of my actions." Emily approached Sarah, cautiously taking her hands. "And I'll be with you every step of the way. If you'll allow me. I know I can't recover the lost years, but I want to be part of your life now, help you discover your heritage, your history." Sarah looked at these two people, who had been both the architects of her pain and the guardians of her past. She felt a mixture of resentment, compassion, and a strange sense of belonging. "All right," she finally said. "We'll do this together. We'll find out what my father was investigating. What secrets still remain to be revealed. But I warn you, no more lies, no more secrets. If we're going to be a family, it must be based on truth, no matter how painful it may be." As the three prepared to embark on this new stage of their relationship and the search for truth, Sarah couldn't help but feel that she was on the brink of something big, something that would change not only her life, but that of many others. The brass key in her pocket seemed to vibrate with anticipation, as if it knew it was about to open much more than a simple door. What none of them knew was that, at that very moment, someone else was closely following these events, someone who had their own secrets, their own reasons to fear the truth coming to light, someone who would do whatever necessary to keep the past buried, no matter the cost. The following days were a whirlwind of activity for Sarah, Michael, and Emily. Turned into an unlikely investigative team, they immersed themselves in the past, determined to discover what James had found before his death. Sarah, with her experience as a cleaning lady, turned out to have a sharp eye for details and an innate ability to organize information. Michael contributed his knowledge of the business world and his connections, while Emily, with years of experience managing the orphanage, proved to be an excellent manager and negotiator. They reviewed old company documents, interviewed former employees, and followed leads that had lain dormant for decades. Slowly, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. It seems that Dad had discovered a network of corruption that went far beyond your fund diversions, Michael, Sarah said one night, as they reviewed documents in the summer house library. Michael nodded gravely. James was always the most ethical of the two of us. I see now that while I was sinking into my personal problems, he was unraveling something much bigger. Emily, who had been examining an old photo album, let out an exclamation of surprise. "Look at this," she said, showing them a photograph. In it, James was seen with a group of important-looking men, all in elegant suits. Sarah took the photo, her eyes widening in recognition. "This man, he's the current governor. And this other one is the chief of police," added Michael, pointing to another individual in the image. As they delved deeper into their investigation, it became evident that James had uncovered a network of corruption that involved high-ranking government officials, influential businessmen, and even members of the security forces. The company that James and Michael had founded seemed to be just the tip of the iceberg. "Saratu, this is bigger than we imagined," said Sarah, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. "If Dad was about to expose all this..." "His death might not have been a simple accident after all," Emily completed, her face pale at the implication. Michael collapsed into a chair, the weight of the revelation evident on his face. "My God, what have we gotten ourselves into?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What had begun as a personal search for truth had turned into something much more dangerous and far-reaching. "We can't stop now," she said with determination. "We have to finish what Dad started. We have to expose the truth, not just for him, but for all those who have been harmed by this corruption." Emily took Sarah's hand, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and concern. "I'm with you, daughter. But we must be cautious. If these people were capable of doing what they did to your father, they'll stop at nothing to keep us quiet." Michael stood up, a new resolution in his posture. "I'll use my connections, seek allies we can trust. I have a lot to make up for, and this could be my chance to do things right." As the trio planned their next move, none of them noticed the shadow that moved outside the window, nor did they hear the soft click of a camera capturing their meeting. In an elegant office in the city center, a man in an impeccable suit received a message on his phone. Upon seeing the images of Sarah, Michael, and Emily working together, his face hardened. "So James's daughter has decided to stir up the past," he muttered to himself. "It seems we'll have to take measures to ensure that some secrets remain buried." Meanwhile, at the summer house, Sarah felt a sudden chill, as if someone had walked over her grave. She looked at the brass key she now carried as a talisman and wondered what other doors it would open, what other secrets it would reveal, and what dangers awaited them on the path ahead. The search for truth had begun in earnest, but the price of that truth might be higher than any of them imagined. The past and present were about to collide in a way that would shake the foundations of society, and Sarah found herself at the center of the approaching storm. As Sarah, Michael, and Emily delved deeper into their investigation, they realized they needed help. The network of corruption they had uncovered was vast and powerful, and the three of them alone couldn't face it. One afternoon, while discussing their next steps at the summer house, they heard a knock at the door. Sarah opened it cautiously, surprised to find Laura, Michael's ex-wife, standing on the threshold. "I know what you're doing," Laura said without preamble, her voice tense but determined. "And I want to help." Michael jumped to his feet, his face a mixture of shock and suspicion. "What are you doing here, Laura? How did you know where to find us?" Laura entered the house, closing the door behind her. "I have my own sources, Michael. And before you think the worst, no, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because I have information you need." Sarah looked at Laura warily. This was the woman who had planned to murder Michael. The woman whose actions had triggered this whole chain of events. "Why should we trust you?" she asked. Laura sighed, collapsing into a chair. For the first time, Sarah saw beyond her facade of a cold and calculating woman. Laura looked tired, even scared. Because I too was a victim of this corruption network, Laura confessed. My plan to get rid of Michael wasn't my idea. I was coerced, threatened. There are very powerful people behind all this. People who will stop at nothing to keep their secrets. Michael approached Laura, his expression softening slightly. Who are these people, Laura? What do you know? The governor, for starters, said Laura, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are judges, businessmen, even some media outlets involved. They've been operating in the shadows for decades, manipulating contracts, influencing elections, silencing anyone who threatens to expose them. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Like my father, she murmured. Laura nodded solemnly. James Thompson was one of their victims. Yes. But there have been others over the years, journalists who mysteriously disappeared, witnesses who suddenly retracted, judges who were reassigned to minor cases. Emily, who had remained silent until now, approached Laura. How did you get involved in all this? Laura lowered her gaze, the shame evident on her face. I was young and ambitious once. I did things I'm not proud of to advance my career. When I wanted out, they let me know they knew too much about me. They had me trapped. Sarah processed all this information, her mind working at full speed. Then why now? Why did you decide to help us? Because I'm tired, Laura admitted. Tired of living in fear, tired of being a piece in their game, and because I saw something in you. Sarah, the same determination your father had. I believe that if anyone can expose the truth and end all this, it's you. Silence fell over the room as everyone assimilated Laura's words. Sarah looked at Michael and Emily, seeking their opinion. Both nodded slowly, recognizing the importance of this new ally. All right, Laura, Sarah finally said. We'll listen to you, but we need to know everything you know. Every detail, no matter how small, could be crucial. Laura nodded, visibly relieved. I'll tell you everything, but you must understand that by doing this, I'm putting myself in great danger. We all are. Over the next few hours, Laura revealed an intricate web of corruption that went beyond what they had imagined. She told them about secret meetings, million-dollar bribes, veiled threats, and destroyed lives. With each revelation, the scope of the conspiracy became clearer and more terrifying. There's something else, Laura said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Something I discovered recently that could be the key to unraveling all of this. Everyone leaned forward, expectant. There's a file, Laura continued. A digital file with evidence of all the network's illicit activities, bank transactions, compromising emails, audio recordings. It's all there. Where is this file? Michael asked, his voice tense with anticipation. That's the problem, Laura replied. It's hidden and encrypted. I only know that the key to accessing it has something to do with the company you and James founded, something related to the early days, before everything got complicated. Sarah felt her heart race, instinctively. Her hand went to the brass key she wore around her neck. The key, she murmured. The key you gave me, Michael. Could it be? Michael looked at her with wide eyes. It's possible. James was always fond of riddles and elaborate security measures. If he hid that file, he would have used something that only we could decipher. Emily approached Sarah, examining the key closely. Look, she said, pointing to small marks on the key's handle. These notches, they're not random, they seem to form a pattern. Sarah felt they were on the verge of a great discovery. The key that had been a symbol of her newly discovered heritage could also be the key to exposing the truth and bringing justice. We need to decipher this pattern, Sarah said with determination, and we need to do it fast. If Laura could discover the existence of this file, it's possible that others know about it too. We're in a race against time. Just then, the sound of breaking glass startled them all. A rock had come through the window, landing in the middle of the room. Tied to it was a note. With trembling hands, Sarah untied it and read aloud. Abandon your search now. The next warning won't be so kind. Fear was palpable in the room. They were touching sensitive nerves, getting too close to the truth, and those responsible were willing to do anything to stop them. "We can't back down now," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. "We've come too far. We must continue. For my father, for all the victims of this corruption network." Michael nodded, standing up. "You're right, but we need to be more careful. We need a safe place to work, and, possibly, protection." "I know someone who can help us," Laura said. "A former police officer who was expelled from the force for refusing to be part of the corruption. I trust him." Emily took Sarah's hand. "We're with you, daughter. To the end." Sarah looked around at this unlikely group united by the search for truth and justice. Her father, James, had started this path decades ago, and now she would continue it, with unexpected allies by her side. As they prepared to leave the house, aware that it was no longer safe, Sarah clutched the brass key in her hand. It was more than a symbol now. It was a promise, a responsibility, and she was determined to uncover its secrets, no matter the cost. What none of them knew was that at that very moment, in an elegant office in the city center, a group of powerful men was meeting in emergency. On a large screen, images of Sarah, Michael, Emily, and now Laura were projected. "The situation has become complicated," one of them said, his voice cold and calculating. "It's time to take more definitive measures." Danger lurked around every corner, and the race for truth was about to turn deadly. The night had fallen when Sarah, Michael, Emily, and Laura arrived at a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. The former police officer Laura had mentioned, Jack Reynolds, greeted them with a mixture of caution and determination in his gaze. "Come in quickly," Jack said, casting a nervous glance at the hallway before closing the door. "It's not safe to stay outside for long." The apartment was small but meticulously organized. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings, photographs, and maps interconnected with colored threads. Sarah immediately recognized the work of someone obsessed with uncovering the truth. "I've been following this corruption network for years," Jack explained as he served them coffee, "but I never had enough evidence to expose everything. When Laura contacted me and told me about you and the file, I knew this could be our chance." Sarah took out the brass key and placed it on the table. "We believe this is the key to accessing the file," she said, "but we don't know how to decipher the code on it." Jack examined the key with interest. "Interesting. The marks seem to form a binary pattern. It could be a code for a location or a password." While Jack and Michael worked on deciphering the code, Emily and Laura focused on organizing the information they had gathered so far. Sarah, for her part, approached the wall full of clippings and photographs, trying to connect the dots. Suddenly, something caught her attention. It was an old photograph, yellowed by time, showing a group of young businessmen. She recognized her father and Michael, but there was another face that seemed familiar. "Jack," Sarah called. "Who is this man?" Jack approached and looked at the photograph. His expression darkened. "That's William Carter. He's now one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. But back then he was just an ambitious young man. He was the one who started this whole corruption network." Sarah felt her blood run cold. William Carter. The name resonated in her mind, bringing with it a distant memory. "I met him," she said quietly, "when I was a child at the orphanage. He came to make a donation, a big ceremony with press and everything. I remember he looked at me in a strange way, as if he recognized me." Emily approached, her face pale. "William knew who you were, Sarah. He was the one who pressured us to leave you at the orphanage. He threatened to expose Michael's shady dealings if we didn't. The revelation fell like a bomb in the room." Sarah felt short of breath. All this time, the architect of her abandonment, the man responsible for her father's death, had been there, hidden in plain sight. "We have to confront him," Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger and determination. "We have to make him pay for everything he's done." "It won't be easy," Jack warned. "Carter has connections everywhere. Politicians, judges, media outlets. Confronting him directly would be suicidal." "Unless," Michael began, his eyes shining with a sudden idea. Unless we use his own tactics against him, if we can access that file, we could strategically leak the information, turn his allies against him. Laura nodded, understanding the plan. Divide and conquer. If we can get them to betray each other, the whole structure will crumble. As they discussed the details of the plan, the sound of a phone startled them. It was Jack's cell phone. His face paled as he saw the message. "We have to go now," he said urgently. "My contacts in the police are warning me that a raid is coming. Someone has tipped them off." In a matter of minutes, the group gathered all the vital information and left the apartment. As they ran down the emergency stairs, Sarah couldn't help but wonder who had betrayed them. Was there a mole among them, or was Carter's network even more extensive than they had imagined? Upon reaching the street, they split into two groups: Sarah, Emily, and Jack in one car, Michael and Laura in another. They agreed to meet at a safe place outside the city. As they drove away, Sarah saw in the rearview mirror how several patrol cars arrived at the building they had just left. The race against time had become even more desperate. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked Jack, who was driving with determination. "To a place Carter would never expect," Jack replied. "We're going to the old factory where it all began, where your father and Michael founded their first company." Sarah clutched the brass key in her hand. She felt they were on the brink of a great discovery, but also on the edge of the greatest danger they had faced so far. As the city faded behind them and the darkness of night enveloped them, Sarah couldn't help but think of her father. "We're close, Dad," she murmured to herself. "Soon, very soon, the truth will come to light." What Sarah didn't know was that at that very moment, William Carter was receiving a call that would put him on high alert. The hunt had begun, and only one side would emerge victorious. The brass key, silent witness to decades of secrets, was about to reveal its last and most dangerous mystery. The old factory loomed like a rusty metal giant under the moonlight. Sarah, Emily, and Jack entered the abandoned building, their footsteps echoing in the night silence. Shortly after, Michael and Laura joined them, having managed to evade their pursuers. "This place," Michael murmured, his voice laden with nostalgia and remorse. "This is where it all began. Where James and I dreamed of changing the world." Sarah scanned the place, imagining her father working there, young and full of hope. "And this is where we'll finish what he started," she said with determination. Jack approached an old computer terminal covered in dust. "If we're going to decipher the key's code, this is the place. Old systems are sometimes the most secure." While Jack and Michael worked on the computer, Sarah, Emily, and Laura kept watch, aware that they could be discovered at any moment. After what seemed like an eternity, Jack let out an exclamation of triumph. "We've got it! The key's code has given us access to a hidden server. The file is here." Everyone gathered around the screen, holding their breath as the documents loaded. What they saw left them breathless. Fraudulent contracts, million-dollar transfers to offshore accounts, emails detailing bribes and threats. The magnitude of the corruption was overwhelming. "My God," Emily whispered, "this is bigger than we imagined." Sarah felt a mixture of horror and vindication. "We have to make this information public. The world needs to know the truth." Just then, the sound of approaching vehicles alerted them. Flashlight beams filtered through the factory's broken windows. "They've found us," Laura said, fear evident in her voice. "Quick," Jack urged. "I'm sending an encrypted copy of the file to several trusted journalists and prosecutors. Whatever happens tonight, the truth will come out." Sarah made a decision in that instant. "You all get out through the back. I'll distract them." "No," Emily protested. "I won't leave you alone." "Mom," Sarah said, the word coming out naturally for the first time, "trust me, I have a plan." With tears in her eyes, Emily hugged her daughter. Michael approached and handed Sarah a small device. "It's a recorder. Use it wisely." As the rest of the group escaped through a back exit, Sarah took a deep breath and walked towards the factory's main entrance. With the hidden recorder and the brass key hanging from her neck, she prepared to face her destiny. The doors burst open, and a group of armed men entered, led by a figure Sarah immediately recognized, William Carter. Sarah Thompson, Carter said, his voice cold and calculating. At last we meet face to face. You've been a thorn in my side for far too long. Sarah remained calm, aware that every word was being recorded. Mr. Carter, it seems you know me well. How curious, considering I grew up in an orphanage, supposedly without family. Carter smiled, but it was a joyless smile. Ah, James's daughter, as brave as your father, you know. He also thought he could defy me. Look how that ended. Are you admitting that you were responsible for my father's death? Sarah asked, her heart pounding. Admitting is a very strong word, Carter replied, moving closer. Let's say your father became an obstacle to progress, just like you are now. But unlike him, I'm giving you the chance to choose a different path. Sarah raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Carter extended his hand. Join us, Sarah. With your intelligence and determination, you could go far. Why fight against the system when you can be part of it? I offer you power, wealth, everything you've ever wanted. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to imagine that life, the luxury, the influence, the security. But then she thought of her father, of all those who had suffered because of Carter's corruption and his network. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, Sarah said, standing tall. But I already have everything I want. I have the truth, and soon the whole world will know it. Carter's face contorted with rage. Fool, you think you can defy me and go unpunished. I'll end you like I ended your father. At that moment, sirens were heard in the distance. Carter looked around, confused. Sarah smiled. Oh, didn't I mention? While we were talking, the information we discovered has been streaming live to several news stations and prosecutors' offices, and now, thanks to you, we have your confession recorded. Chaos erupted. Carter's men, seeing that the situation had turned against them, began to flee. Carter, furious, tried to lunge at Sarah, but at that moment, the doors opened again. Jack entered, followed by a team of honest police officers and journalists. William Carter, you're under arrest, Jack announced, handcuffing the stunned businessman. Sarah watched as Carter was led away, shouting threats and accusations. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Emily, Michael, and Laura. We couldn't leave you alone, Emily said, hugging her daughter. The following hours were a whirlwind of statements, interviews, and revelations. The corruption network began to crumble as more and more implicated individuals were exposed. The days that followed were intense. The city, the entire country, was shaken by the revelations. Politicians resigned, businessmen were arrested, and investigations were initiated at all levels of government. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, hailed as a heroine by some, viewed with suspicion by others. But she remained firm, determined to see justice done. One afternoon, while resting at her father's summer house, she received an unexpected visit. It was the new Attorney General, a woman with a firm gaze and an impeccable reputation. Miss Thompson, said the Attorney General, I want to personally thank you for your bravery. Thanks to you and your team, we have the opportunity to clean up decades of corruption. Sarah nodded, grateful. What happens now? There will be trials. Many trials, the Attorney General replied, and we'll need your testimony. But there's something else. We've been reviewing the files of your father and Michael's company. It seems they had plans for several social and environmental projects that were never realized. Social projects? Sarah asked, intrigued. The Attorney General smiled. Yes, it seems your father had a very different vision for the company, and now that the truth has come to light, we have the opportunity to make those dreams a reality. Sarah felt her heart fill with emotion. The possibility of continuing her father's legacy, of using the company to do good, was more than she had ever imagined. The following months were of intense work. Sarah, along with Michael, Emily, and Laura, dedicated themselves to restructuring the company. They implemented the social projects James had dreamed of, created scholarship programs for low-income youth, and established environmental protection initiatives. Jack DeWine, for his part, was reinstated to the police force, leading a new anti-corruption unit. A year after the discovery of the file, Sarah found herself at the inauguration of a new community center in the neighborhood where the orphanage once stood. As she cut the ribbon, surrounded by her family and friends, she couldn't help but think about how much her life had changed. "Now your father would be very proud," Emily whispered to her, tears in her eyes. Sarah nodded, emotional. She brought her hand to the brass key that still hung from her neck. It was no longer just a symbol of her past, but a promise for the future. That night, as she observed the city from the balcony of her new apartment, Sarah reflected on her journey. From being a cleaning lady ignored by everyone, she had become a respected voice, a leader in the fight against corruption and in promoting social change. But more importantly, she had found her place in the world, had discovered the truth about her past, and had forged a future full of hope and purpose. The brass key shone under the moonlight, reminding her that sometimes the darkest secrets can lead to the most luminous discoveries. 5 years had passed since that night at the old factory. The city had changed, the country had changed, and Sarah had changed with them. The company that was once the heart of a corruption network was now a model of social responsibility and business ethics. Sarah, as CEO, had implemented policies that prioritized employee well-being and positive impact on the community. Emily, retired from the orphanage, now ran a foundation that helped vulnerable children. Michael, after serving a brief sentence for his role in past events, worked with the foundation, dedicating his business expertise to charitable causes. Laura, for her part, had become a tireless advocate for government transparency, using her insider knowledge to advise anti-corruption organizations. It was a sunny afternoon when Sarah received a call from Jack. "Sarah, we need to meet. There's something you should know." Intrigued and a little worried, Sarah met Jack in a nearby park. The former police officer, now head of the anti-corruption unit, had a serious expression. "We've discovered something," Jack began, "related to your father's death." Sarah felt her heart race. "What is it?" Jack handed her an envelope. "We found this in one of Carter's properties. It's a letter, written by your father the night before his death." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope and began to read. "Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means my fears have come true. I've discovered something terrible, something that could change the course of our nation. But I also know that by exposing the truth, I'm putting my life and yours at risk. I want you to know that every decision I've made, even keeping you at a distance, has been to protect you. I hope someday you can understand and forgive me. Always remember that the truth, though sometimes painful, is the path to justice and freedom. Never stop fighting for what is right. I love you, my little Sarah. I'm proud of the woman I know you'll become, your father, James." Tears ran down Sarah's cheeks as she read her father's last words. It was a closure she didn't know she needed, a validation of everything she had had fought for. "Thank you, Jack," Sarah said, hugging the letter to her chest. That night, Sarah gathered her family and friends at the summer house. Laura. All those who had been part of her incredible journey were there. As they shared stories and memories, Sarah realized she had found something she had always longed for, a sense of belonging, a chosen family bound by ties stronger than blood. Raising her glass, Sarah proposed a toast. To truth, to justice, and to dreams that never die. To my father, whose legacy will live on through our actions, and to all of us, who had the courage to face darkness and bring light to our world. As the others joined in the toast, Sarah looked at the brass key she still carried with her. It was no longer a symbol of secrets and pain, but a reminder of her journey, of the doors she had opened and those yet to be opened. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in golden and pink hues. Sarah smiled, feeling a peace she had never experienced before. Her life had been a series of unexpected turns, of challenges and triumphs, of losses and discoveries. But now, surrounded by love and purpose, Sarah knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The past had been revealed, justice had been done, and the The future was full of possibilities. As night fell and the stars began to shine, Sarah knew that her story, the story that had begun with a simple brass key, would continue, because every ending is just the beginning of something new, and Sarah Thompson was ready for the next chapter of her life, whatever it might be.